Hello, David Clark here from DVC Training, and I'm going to do a short video here about the new features that are in EDIUS 10.3. Don't normally do an introduction to camera on my videos, but I thought I would here just to test out one of the new features, which is the fact that it deals better with footage taken on mobile phones. Mobile phone footage is normally in variable frame rate, and my little Pixel, which is currently doing the videoing here, also films stuff in variable frame rate, so I thought I'd do a bit of camera here to see how well that works in the new version of EDIUS. So, hey, you get to see me. There's a whole bunch of new stuff that's come along in 10.3, one of which you might see immediately by looking at my screen here, and that is that it is a version which officially supports Windows 11. So here I am, Windows 11 system, which you can more or less tell because the taskbar is bigger and all the icons are in the middle. And when you look at things like Windows Explorer Windows, you can see they've got little curvy edges on them. EDIUS X now supports Windows 11 as well as Windows 10. Doesn't mean you have to rush out and get Windows 11 on your system, but if you buy a new system and you're just using EDIUS, then you might as well get it because obviously Windows 11 is the future. I could do a separate video on what I think of Windows 11, which is mainly, it's okay, it's not a revolution, there's some nice stuff about it, haven't found anything majorly irritating about it, haven't found a major reason to change to it if you've got a working Windows 10 system. But if you are going to buy a new one, then it's probably a good idea to get Windows 11 on there. Well, now EDIUS X supports Windows 11 properly. I have been asked, what about if I've got EDIUS 8 or EDIUS 9? They may work on Windows 11, I don't know, and I don't know if they're going to be changed. Unfortunately, what I do know is that EDIUS X is the official version to use if you're on Windows 11. Now, apart from the Windows 11 support, there's been quite a few other changes inside of EDIUS, and a lot of very small welcome changes, little things that will just make your life a lot easier. So I'm going to go through some of those. My favourite of all the changes may sound like a really small one, but it's a huge time saver for me, and that's what happens when you go to export a clip. So suppose I've got a sequence here, and I give it a name, just triple right click, and I go to export it. You choose the format you want, click on export, and the name of the sequence is already there as the file name. Now that might sound like a small change, but when you are exporting lots of sequences like I do from my tutorials where I'll have a sequence for each individual chapter, the fact that I name them properly in here and it's automatically there when I click the export button is such a time saver. And that's possibly my most favourite thing because it was just so irritating having to either copy and paste things or type them again or whatever. Now click, bong, there it is, name's in there. Lovely. Another new thing is that they have improved the way that EDIUS deals with variable frame rate footage. So I filmed this little piece to camera with my phone. It's about 5 minutes long, and it was specifically to find out how well EDIUS deals with variable frame rate footage. Because like most phones, my Pixel saves video in variable frame rate, which means it's not exactly 30 frames a second or 25 frames a second. And this always causes problems with all editing programs. Typically with variable frame rate footage, the sound drifts out of sync as you're playing it, so it might be in sync at the start, but towards the end it isn't. And the longer the clip is, the more out of sync it gets. With my particular tests here, it has worked. This footage is in sync at the end. And don't forget to like this video and just as it is at the beginning. Just like everything, of course, there's so many ways that phones can do stuff and so many ways different manufacturers change things. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't work for every piece of footage, but it's great that it does work a lot better than it used to, and certainly works fine for my footage. Now with this phone footage, the audio there, well, it's on a phone, and it's a bit naff if you listen to that. David doing a bit. So when I was doing that, I did also record everything onto a separate microphone. This is not new in EDIUS X. I just thought I'd mention it. It is something that is still a great thing to have inside of EDIUS. I've got my video, I've got my audio, I need to sync them up. What do? Right click, lasso them, choose multi-camera sync, choose to do it on the audio, let me make up a new sequence. It's put me in a multi-camera sequence. I'm not actually multi-cameraing this, I'm just using the audio sync to line up the sound. But now if you open up the waveforms here, you can see the two waveforms match. This is the sound that came off the phone. Here from DVC Training. And if I enable it, this is the sound that came off the microphone. And I'm just going to do a short video about the new feature. But it made life so much easier, that multi-camera sync. Of course, what I could then do to clean up the sound is to put a bit of noise reduction onto it, using the Acorn filters that I've gone in there, which will clean it up, open it up, and then fiddle with the attenuation a bit to make it sound slightly better. And then possibly put a tone controller on there just to improve the quality of the sound a bit. Of course, I could have tried to use my lovely Acorn filters to try and clean up the phone footage, so let's have a quick go at that. So let's just normalize it, bit of a hiss, denoise it slightly. Hello, David Clark here from DVC. And then if it's a bit far away, let's try a bit of a de-reverb, see what that does. Hello, David Clark here from DVC Training, and I'm just going to do a short video about the new features. And like I said, the new stuff there is the fact that Edius is dealing better with variable frame rate clips. The noise reduction and the multi-camera sync were added in previous versions, but so good they're worth mentioning again. Another nice new feature is what happens when you put one sequence inside another. Again, this is a good time saver for me when I'm doing tutorials. Whenever I'm doing a tutorial, I will do my edit and chop out all the bits that I don't want you to hear and all the bits where I went wrong, and then I will take that timeline and put it in a new one. So let's do it with this Edius 10.3 timeline, and I'm just going to make up a new sequence, find the timeline, and shove it inside another timeline. Now, if you open it up, in previous versions of Edius, you would never see the waveform of the timeline down here. What you can see now is that I can actually see the sound that is used on that clip in the Edius 10.3 timeline. That's really useful actually, specifically with my tutorials, but lots of other things, because when I'm then panning and scanning or looking for a bit where I want to move around, I can see the sound and I can identify it a lot clearer. Of course, if I go into this timeline and change something, so let's just say normalize this, make it really loud, nice big waveform, so the whole thing's a lot louder. Let's pan it to the center. It has to remake the waveform again, which it does pretty quickly, and that now reflects the new sound that I've got inside there. If you go to the job monitor, the waveform cache, which is what they call this little drawing of a picture here, the waveform cache for this kind of thing is a job that appears in the job monitor, just like the waveform cache for any video clips that you load up. So this here will be the one that it's just remade because I made that change. And that's great. Another nice thing is that if I was to put some markers in here, in my original sequence, and go to the second one, those markers make it from that sequence and appear in the master sequence. A marker on the nested timeline will appear on the main timeline. Again, great little time savers. These are appearing as clip markers, so obviously if you put a marker on the timeline, it appears at the top. But if you put a marker on a clip, so let's grab hold of my clip of me, pop it into here and stick a couple of markers on it. Those are markers actually on the clip. When you put that clip onto the timeline, they make it onto the timeline on the clip itself. And of course they'll move around with the clip as opposed to the markers on the timeline, which obviously stay where they are on the timeline. Now, I mean, there is a whole thing about clip markers, whether they're anchored or not anchored. You could have a look at my tutorial for more information on that. But basically, you have markers on the timeline and markers on the clip. In previous versions of Edius, if you put markers on the clip and then put the clip onto the timeline, you couldn't put any more markers onto it. There's another clip, put it on the timeline, it's got no markers on it. If I take that clip, put it into the source and stick a marker on it, they don't appear on the timeline. So once a clip was on the timeline, you couldn't put markers on it, which was something people have been requesting quite a lot. Well, now you can. What you've got to do is say set clip marker. Now, it's not immediately obvious where that is because you can't right click on it, you can't go up to the marker window. You know, if I add a marker from the marker window, it goes onto the timeline. So to actually be able to put a marker on a clip as opposed to the timeline, I've got to add a keyboard shortcut. So to do that, I'm coming up to settings, user settings, user interface, keyboard shortcut, and I am going to put in marker in the find file, so it finds me all the keyboard shortcuts that have got something to do with markers. Notice a lot of them aren't assigned. There are so many things you can assign keyboard shortcuts inside of Edius, you can't possibly have all of them assigned as it is. Now what I want to do is look through this and say set marker to selected clips. Now I can choose that one, or I can say set blue marker, or say set a pink marker. Let's say I want to do blue markers on clips, so I'm going to take that one, double click on here, and let's say Alt and V. I'm using V because that's the default keyboard shortcut for markers inside of Edius, so I'm doing a variation that at Alt and V. Alt and V is assigned to something else. Do I want to change it? Well, I personally don't happen to use that, so yes, I'm quite happy to change it. And now what happens is I can come along here, go Alt V, and it puts a blue marker on that clip. If you want to add any comments on that marker, you can just come to the marker window. You can type some comments in here. The clip marker window will only be highlighted here when you actually add the marker. As soon as you go away from it and come back again, this is showing sequence markers. So if you want to be able to edit those markers after you've added them to the timeline, then again come to the keyboard shortcuts and go to edit marker on selected clip, and I'm going to do Control-Alt-V for that and add a keyboard shortcut. And now I can go Control-Alt-V and it'll let me edit what's actually written on that clip marker. You also notice that those comments I put in now pop up here on the display, just like they do for sequence markers. You could even just assign a keyboard shortcut to this one and nothing else. If I assign a keyboard shortcut for that, go to the bit where there isn't a marker and then use that keyboard shortcut, you'll notice it puts the marker in, it adds the dialog box, I can type something in, I can choose the colour, I can choose how long the marker is, all from that one keyboard shortcut, rather than having to assign a different keyboard shortcut to each colour of marker. Another keyboard shortcut thing they've added is the ability to change your Windows layouts by a keyboard shortcut. So you've always had the ability to save a custom layout, say maybe I want to put the information window up there, make the timeline bigger. Let's save that as a new layout, and I'm going to call it something that makes sense to me. And of course I can always swap between my layouts just by going Apply Layout. But what you might notice here is that there's suddenly a number in front of these things. My new one being Screen Layout number 2. And I can now assign a keyboard shortcut to be able to switch between these two. I've been asked for many years for this. Again, it's another thing that just makes your life a little bit easier. And all you do is you go to the keyboard shortcuts, you look for the keyboard shortcut in particular, so I started typing the word layout in and it comes up with apply layout blah de blah de blah. And now what I can do is say, right, layout number 1, let's assign that to F2. Layout number 2, let's assign that to F3. Currently they're assigned to the input presets, which you can call up the capture window by pressing F2 and F3 if you have capture presets in there. So now I've assigned both of those things, apply, and now I can just swap my window layout by going F2, F3, which is an awful lot quicker. So if you have a layout for doing audio editing or you have a layout for doing effects or whatever, you can just swap between them quickly. If you look at the README for 10.3, there's a thing that they say zoom into player slider by a keyboard shortcut. Now it's very possible you might even not be aware of this particular feature. It's actually very useful when you've got a very long clip. So I've got a very long clip here, this is only 5 minutes, and I'm looking at it and I'm trying to set an in and an out point somewhere. And I might get it roughly to the right area, but I need to get a little bit more refined. This little button here lets you take that in and out and spread it over this entire slider. Now I can get a lot more refined inside my in and out area. Now I find this incredibly useful if I've got a very long clip, that little button. That little button's always been there. Now you can add a keyboard shortcut to it, which will just make using it quicker. Now I've got to find it, so what's it called? Let's hang over it. It's called Larger Slider. Okay, let's go to this and put in larger. And let me assign that. I'm going to assign it to, I don't know, F4. So now in the player window, there we are. I'm going to set an in and out point. I want to have a better look at that area. F4. F4 back to the whole clip. It's just quicker than clicking that. Another nice improvement is the ability to copy and paste attributes between clips. So if we take this particular clip here, I have got a color correction on there, I've got a few keyframes on the audio, and I've got a denoise filter on there. Now if I wanted to copy some of these filters over to here, like the primary color corrector, I could select it, grab it, drag it, and drop it onto that one, and that works. I could do the same with the audio. I can't do both at the same time. I also can't copy things like audio keyframes from one to the other. Well, now you can. I'm going to select the clip, right click and say copy, pop to the second one, right click and say paste attributes. And here you can see I've got select attributes, do just the attributes, or do the clip and the attributes. So if I say attributes only, it copies everything from there to there. Doesn't do the clip markers, but it does everything else. Let me just undo that. But I do have the option, if I right click on it, to choose paste attributes and then say select attributes. And here you can see all the different types of attributes I can choose to copy from one clip to another. I can say, yeah, let's do everything. Or no, let's not do everything. Let's just do all the audio effects. Or let's just do the video effects but not the layouters and not the opacity. Or on the audio, maybe not the volume. So I've chosen not to do some things there. Paste it, and what's happened is now the primary color corrector has gone in, the audio effect has gone in, but the keyframe changes on the audio haven't. You'll also notice from that dialog box that there is an option to save that as the default. So you can set it up to only do certain attributes, and then the next time you do it, if you just say paste selected attributes, it will only paste in the selected attributes as opposed to doing all of them. Other option you might notice in there is, let's go to this clip, which is a humongous clip, 5 minutes. Right click and say paste attributes and select them, and let's select everything again. What happens about keyframes? Like here I've got keyframes on the audio. Do they stay as far apart as they are at the moment, or do they get longer to fit the clip? So this clip is a lot longer. If I say keep original, it goes on there and my audio changes, as you notice, are all squeezed up at the front in the same amount of space as they were here. Let's undo that and let's do it again, but this time let's stretch it to fit. So there are the keyframes that were on that clip and have been stretched out. So they last a lot longer, but they've been stretched out to fit the clip. Now that's something we just could not do before. We couldn't paste things like these audio keyframes before, and we couldn't adjust the timing on an effect as you pasted it. So those are all welcome improvements. If I have a whole bunch of clips and I say paste attributes, it's grayed out because paste attributes only does one clip at a time. I'd like it if you could actually paste the same attributes to lots of clips at once. Also, you can have problems if you're pasting attributes from one type of clip to another. So again, let's take this clip here. I'm going to right click on it and just say copy, and I'm going to do another one and go paste attributes. And again, it's grayed out. This is a clip with audio and video. This is a clip with audio and video. But this is a clip where the audio and video are split up onto different tracks, and you can't paste the attributes from that to that because Edius sees them as different things. What I could do is take off the linking, just select the audio and copy it, go to the audio on this clip and just select the audio of that, and then paste the attributes, and it will work. So I can get around it, but I can't do both at the same time. Again, another nice improvement. I mean, there are always things you could do, like copy filters just remove, which I do use all the time because I find that's incredibly quick to do stuff. If I did that, copied a filter over and I did it again, the original one stays there. You notice I've got two primary color correctors. I copied over one and then copied over another one, so I end up with two. And when I'm copying over a list of effects where there's maybe 5 different effects in it, and I do it once, but then I realise I've changed them and I have to do it again, I have to delete the old ones, then copy them again, otherwise I end up the whole thing twice. Another nice thing about paste attributes is I can take that, copy it, right click, paste attributes, and here I've got this option to, when I'm pasting them, do I replace what's there or do I add it on top? Well, here I can choose replace. Yay, those other filters have gone and I've just got the new one. I have to admit, the number of times I have taken a list of effects from here, copied them to one clip and then wanted to put them on a bunch of other clips, and I've ended up with loads of duplicate filters in there. That is again going to be a great time saver. So again, nice little adjustment, being able to copy and paste attributes. Another nice new feature is this thing up here that says full frames. To show this off, I've just knocked up a very quick montage here. Rubbish, because I've used the same clip twice. Even if I've used the same clip twice, this is a timeline that Edius cannot play back. My project's currently in 4K. These clips don't even match the frame rate of the timeline. And lo and behold, yep, it can't play it back. It is struggling. What do I do about that? Now you do have this thing where you can just drop the quality of the timeline and maybe it will play it back. Oh, it's done that. This was workgroup only, but now it's in workgroup and pro as of Edius X. If you're in Edius 9, you know you don't have this as an option in the pro version. So that would be my first go-to, drop the quality a bit and see if I can play it back. Of course, that drops the quality. It's not looking as good. So your other option is this one. This skips frames. So it doesn't do it automatically. And what you have to do is choose the number of frames that you want to skip. But as opposed to playing every frame, you can try playing every other frame. So if you're playing every other frame, it doesn't have to work so hard. It's only doing half the work, so maybe it can play it back. So let's pop this to every other frame. Yep, not quite managing that. Let's pop it to every third frame. We can see the buffer's slowly climbing and it is playing it back. Now let me put this into a loop and start that playing back. And yep, that is now playing every third frame. But it's playing it properly and the sound is keeping up. So the sound's normal. And you're seeing a full quality picture, you're just not seeing every frame of a full quality picture. Now you don't know how many frames you have to set. You have to work it out just by trying it. But you choose these numbers and it will drop more and more frames. If I go to 30, that is actually playing basically one frame every second or so. So I'm only getting the occasional frame, but I am hearing the sound properly. You're getting a proper feedback, so you're hearing the audio mix properly, and it's playing it in real time, it's just not playing every frame. These numbers up here tell you how many frames you're dropping. It's not telling you the frame rate it's trying to play it back. If you're in a 25 frames a second project, which I do most of the time because I'm in PAL land, why would you choose 30 frames a second in a 25 frames a second project? That's just weird. No, you're not doing that. You're telling it to drop 30 frames. So it would play frame 1, then it would play the 30th frame, which would be a second and 5 frames in, then it would play the 60th frame, which is going to be 2 seconds and 10 frames. It's just telling you how much you're actually dropping, not the frame rate you're playing it back. So like at 25 frames a second, if I chose that, it will play 1 frame every second. If I choose something like that, it's kind of 1 frame every half and a bit. Don't think too much about it and just try these numbers and see what happens. As soon as you get one where you can play it back, the buffer's climbing. So obviously remember your EDIUS buffer down here tells you how it's coping with it. As long as that's going up, it's coping with it. So that tells you it's coping with the timeline and you can hear the sound properly. Yeah, you've got to a setting that EDIUS can cope with. So the advantage of that over this is that this will play it at the full quality, that drops the quality. And there are some times when this doesn't work. Because of the way this works, it drops the quality of the original footage, but you still have to read the original footage. So if you're reading 4K footage, it has to read that 4K footage in, then drop the quality of it, then play it back. This more changes the quality of any effects it's working out. So if you're playing it at half resolution, and you're zooming into something, it's not having to do so much work to do that zoom, because it's only doing it at half quality, but it's still having to read a 4K file at 4K quality. If it can't get that information fast enough, this probably won't help you play it back. This will, because it won't bother to try and get every frame, it'll try and get every other frame, or every 4th frame, or every 5th frame. So it's just a nice thing that's been added in to help you play back timelines that won't play back properly. Of course, the other option you've got is proxy mode. Spoken to a few people about that recently. It appears that a lot of people aren't really aware of proxy mode. Proxy mode is something that lets you convert the footage into something that's more usable, and then you edit with that, but then you export off the original stuff, so you get the proper quality when you get the final export, but proxy mode lets you edit with the stuff at a lower quality very easily. Now I did a long video about this, which you can see on my website. I'll put a link in the description, because it's been in EDIUS for a few years. But proxy mode is another way of getting around this. And if you haven't tried it and if you're having problems playing it back, I would definitely recommend having a go at proxy mode, because it actually works really well in EDIUS. And you'd think computers got so good now, surely they can cope with anything. No, they can't. Recently, people have started using 4K, 5K, 6K, 8K footage. I mean, the latest GoPro 10 films in 50p 5K. You might not be editing and making 50p 5K, you might be shoving it onto an HD timeline, but you still have to be able to play the stuff in the first place. They're using H.265, which is really hard work for machines to play back. Suddenly you need ways of playing stuff back that your computer can't cope with. Even if you go out and buy the latest one, it doesn't play back everything. Had somebody wanted to play a particular type of 8K footage and it just didn't play back properly in anything. So you needed a way of working around that. And proxy mode, drop frames, drop quality, these are all nice ways of getting you working. Another change is to do with export. If I bring up the export here and I go to H.265, you'll be familiar with H.264, which is basically how you make MP4 files and how most people share stuff these days. You're probably familiar with H.265, it's the same thing but a bit better. It lets you squeeze it a bit more and still have a good picture quality, so you can actually make something into a smaller space. Of course, it's a bit harder to play back and not everything plays it back. So for example, take it over to television, you probably can't play it on there. Now we've been able to make H.265 for some time. Initially you could only make it if you had QuickSync. They recently added the ability to make it if you have an NVIDIA graphics card in the system, but both of those required hardware. The NVIDIA graphics card, the kind of H.265 you can make depends on your graphics card, so it's only later generations of graphics cards that let you do the best quality, IBP frames, as opposed to just INP frames, which was some of the earlier cards could only do. Like in this system, it's got an NVIDIA 1060, which is a few years old, but still a really nice graphics card, but it can't do IB and P frames, so it can't do the best H.265 quality. I do have QuickSync, so I could possibly use that. If you didn't have either of those, you're on an AMD processor and you've got an ATI graphics card, you still couldn't make H.265. Well, now you can, because they've added a software encoder. So I'm just going to select that, export, and now you can see I've got the same dialog box as I would normally get, but it's doing it in software rather than hardware. Now on this particular system, QuickSync doesn't happen to be working at the moment, so I don't have the option of QuickSync. If I had QuickSync, there would be a little hardware tick box down here, just like this. I'll just pop you up a quick shot of what that looks like. Yep, hardware tick box there, which allows you to use QuickSync to export. Now I've got no QuickSync, I'm not using NVIDIA, I can still make an H.265 file with all the usual kinds of parameters of things you want to change. I haven't tested this, but I have also been told that H.265 can also be interlaced. So I'm in a progressive project. To be perfectly honest, if you're going to go and make something which is going to go off on a computer screen somewhere or iPad or anything like that, you're much better off doing it in progressive than interlaced. But if you want to, I have been told the H.265 encoder now does interlaced as well as progressive, which it didn't used to. So again, nice thing for those people that didn't have the particular hardware you needed to make H.265. There's a couple of other things worth mentioning about this update. Firstly, when you install it, if you get an error saying that it can't be installed because something else is using the processes, the best thing to do is just reboot the computer, then don't do anything else and install the Edius update. Because of this whole background rendering thing, Edius is always running something in the background, so if you happen to have used Edius at any point and then you try installing things, sometimes that background thing is still going and it won't let you. If you reboot the computer and don't start Edius, then it should be free and you should be able to install it. Something that's popped up on the forums, which sometimes people have to do with background rendering, is adding Edius into the exceptions on Windows Firewall. There's a sticky on this. Go to my website where you'll see a link to it, or go to the forums where you'll see this information, but sometimes it's a good idea to add Edius and Edius Hub into the exceptions in Windows Defender's Firewall, which you would do by coming to here, going to allow an app through the firewall, change settings, and then clicking on this and finding the 3 programs that they mention in this sticky note on the forums. Some of those have moved with Edius 10.3. 2 of the files that you have to exclude from the firewall are these 2, EH Render Service and EH Render Service Host. They've now moved to the Edius Hub folder. They used to be in the Edius folder. Now, if that's a bit too technical for you, don't worry about it, because you'll only have had to do this if you're having problems, and then you'll follow the instructions on the internet. But if you are aware of that and you have done it, you might have to change where you've actually allowed them through the firewall, because they have moved in this particular version. Another little problem I had was with AVG antivirus. For some reason it started blocking bits of Edius and I had to add Edius into the exceptions on AVG and then it worked. Now this isn't just an Edius problem, sometimes it happens with other things, especially if they're running in the background, because antivirus programs don't like stuff that runs in the background. For obvious reasons, it could be a virus. So sometimes you have to add an exception to a program into them. Well, I found I had to do that on a system that had AVG on it. Obviously I don't want to give you the idea there's loads and loads of problems with this, because there isn't. I've been using 10.3 for a while and it's working fine for me. But just in case you have problems, those are things for you to look at. There's also a bunch of other things that have been changed behind the scenes. There is improved memory management, support for the latest Intel QuickSync processors. It will check that the driver you're using on a Blackmagic card is actually compatible with Edius. and support for updated things like updated Blackmagic Raw and so on. So there's a lot of new extra stuff in there behind the scenes as well. I mean, the ones that really make my life different are things like the exporting and the clip markers and so on. So that's my roundup of everything that was new in EDIUS 10.3. Hope you found it useful. If you want more information, please visit my website www.dvctraining.co.uk. There you can also read about the updates in my EDIUS tutorial, which I've just about finished. I've revamped larger numbers of the sections, so the whole settings section has been changed, the audio editing section has been changed, basic edit section. Lots of new stuff in there and new stuff to do with EDIUS X. If you bought a copy of the tutorial recently, I'll be in touch with how you can download a free update. If you've got an old one, then you can buy an update off of my website. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.